February 2nd is the day of military glory in Russia. On this day in 1943, the Soviet forces defeated the German fascist forces in the Battle of Stalingrad that lasted for 200 days and nights. For the first time in history, such a large formation of forces was surrounded and defeated. The victory in Stalingrad signaled the start of a radical breakthrough in the Great Patriotic War. By 1942, Hitler no longer charged his generals with the task of achieving a quick victory. At this time, he emphasized a gradual strangulation of the Soviet Union. The German army was to reach the Volga and capture Stalingrad, thus cutting off the main logistics artery in Russia. Oil from Grozny and Baku was shipped via the Volga. Germany itself was experiencing a deficit of oil. The brutal fighting continued for many months. There was no front line. They fought for staircases and buildings, and ruins. A 4-story building in the city center was defended by a group of soldiers commanded by Senior Sergeant Pavlov and Lieutenant Afanasyev for 58 days. Longer than the French resisted against the Germans. Pavlov's house became a symbol of the heroic defense of Stalingrad. By November 1942, the Soviet forces only held a narrow strand of land along the Volga. But by that time, the Red Army was finishing the preparations for a mighty attack named Operation Uranus. The unexpected attack was directed at the vulnerable flanks of the enemy group that were manned by Romanian divisions, the least resistant among the German allies. The attack started on the morning of November 19, 1942, and by the evening of 23rd, the Soviet Tank Corps had closed the ring. During the attack, 5 Romanian divisions were defeated and imprisoned. Most importantly, caught in the Stalingrad cauldron were the entire German 6th Army and a part of the 4th Tank Army divisions, 330,000 enemy soldiers and officers in total. Annihilation of General Paulus' 6th Army proved to be a challenging operation that stretched for more than 2 months. The Soviet forces repelled an attack by another German army commanded by one of their most experienced commanders, Manstein, with the mission to storm Stalingrad and rescue their trapped groups. The next hope for the surrounded forces was the air bridge. Hitler promised Paulus that all the food and ammunition necessary for the 6th Army could be delivered by transport planes. But the air bridge communication was also destroyed. Soviet fighter planes hunted down the heavily loaded, clumsy Junkers and Heinkel planes. The enemy's main transport airfield sustained a blow by Vasily Batanov's tank corps that worked its way through the German bases. They managed to destroy 300 German planes on the ground. The ring around the 6th Army was squeezing tighter. In a radio message, Hitler informed Paulus that he promoted him to Field Marshal. No German Field Marshal had been known to be imprisoned. It was a clear suggestion that Paulus was to shoot himself. But the Field Marshal of the defeated army didn't give his Führer such a pleasure. The next morning, he ordered to start surrender negotiations. By that time, only 90,000 soldiers were left alive in the whole grouping. Most were wounded, frostbitten, and starving. Many almost lost their human appearance. The defeat of German armies in Stalingrad didn't only transform the situation on the front line, but also impacted international politics. And this activated the allies of the USSR. Before that, the Great Britain and the USA only helped the Soviet Union with the supply of military machines and equipment, but they weren't rushing to engage in the fight against the Germans with full force. They were watching to see how the struggle in the East would end. After Paulus' capitulation, English-American forces started preparing their first serious operation on the European continent, landing in Italy. Freedom-loving people throughout the world would repeat the word Stalingrad like a password. Konstantin Simonov, who was a frontline correspondent, said metaphorically, "The sound of Stalingrad. The crack that irreparably broke the German machine."